this one? Okay. Can you guys hear me? Good night, everybody. Awesome. Yep. Sweet. Awesome. Okay, let me start by sharing this thing. And so I noticed that some of you guys are still having trouble with the pores. So I decided to do a little mini tutorial today to try to help. and also to talk about some other stuff, you know, some tricks that I use, you know, to try to stay alive at the end of the day after a long day of work. And also gonna be demonstrating, showing some of my textures for the other channels I have other than the color, because the color, just to paint the face, right? Like to paint the albedo, we're gonna need like an entire lesson, right? Like a session to actually go through the entire thing, because it takes a lot of little things to explain in there to make sure that you guys get it. But then for these other maps I'm going to be showing today, those actually you can explore them and see how they look like. And also I can show you how I paint them. You know, it's like the type of brushes I use and everything. So it's a lot of different things to cover today. So let's start with, so this is basically my current state. Like I did some of the work yesterday with you guys in class for the eye bag. This is not HD, so it's all stored in the HD. I didn't do anything on the other side just yet. I just left the way it was. The only thing I added more here is this like mid-res kind of like detail. You know, it's like the rougher stuff, like the bigger forms, like the bigger wrinkles and stuff. So I added some of those. I can show you how I did it too. And I started doing some little render tests, like just to feel the character, you know, reusing the skin from Stan Winston, which I'm gonna have to redo from scratch to show you guys. And also stealing the eyes, right? So I can actually have an idea. So the character is starting to get there, you know. It's like, for example, like it's interesting to observe, like when you have something like some detail, like in the eye bag here, right? In comparison to this side here, has nothing. The difference between, it's almost like it's not the same character, right? You get like so much of that feeling of fleshness and stuff in there. But here it's completely blend. So I'm gonna have to work on that and try to make it the likeness to show up like through the use of more like mid-resolution forms, right? Like the secondary stuff. But the profile is actually working kind of nicely. So I'm gonna be working on it. So let me close this one. Let's go back to ZBrush. And then maybe just like before I go into the pores stuff, like do a little tutorial for you, let's just explore some of those maps, because I think it's going to be cool. You have like a whole weekend coming up, and then I hope you guys can find some time to put some work in it. I normally work during the weekend quite a bit. You know, it's like I help my wife and the kids. We have some fun in the weekend, but then at night I just like, you know, come to the office again and do more work. So probably like this entire face is going to be covered in pores and going to have much more detail by the end of the weekend. So I should post something. About the likeness stuff, right? Like, unfortunately, this class is not something that we start like from, you know, it's like dealing with like primary forms and secondary forms and going to like the specifics about all this stuff, because it's assumed that you guys are modelers already, right? Like you already went through that process. And then this is basically like, it's almost like the advanced stages of it, right? So after you have your model in there, that's when we're gonna make everything shine, right? Like this class is more focused, let's say, like in the detail part of things, the shaders, the lighting, the likeness is basically like I show you how I approach it, but without like forcing you guys to do the same way, you know? Use anything you want for the likeness. If you want to use like, I don't know, like reconstructed scans, if you want to do that, if you want to do like blueprints, right? Like a lot of people do, you can do that as well. But if you want to take as a challenge and try to actually do by observation, right? Like to train your eye to how to see things, because training your eye is important for everything, right? It can be the likeness, it can be how you observe a certain surface to get the feel of it, right? Like the amount of specular you're gonna see in an eye, for example, you know. Everything is about like observing nature and trying to reproduce what you're seeing. So that's why I kind of like force myself to do things by observation for the most part. And then, like I said, like from time to time, I'm gonna check like proportions, right? Like in distances and things like that to make sure that things are working. And there are a couple of ways to do that. For example, like if you have something in ZBrush like that, and you have a similar position for the head in one of your references, one thing that I used to do was to bring, for example, like this screenshot here in a similar position as my reference, and another in the reference itself, both at the same height. So basically like matching the bottom of the chin, and then let's say like the eyebrows in here, and then bring both side by side in Photoshop, and then draw some lines across it. So I can actually compare where the lines are. If the mouth looks a little bit too high or too low in relation to the reference, if the nose, same, you know, it's like just drawing lines from like the bottom of the nose, the corner of the mouth, the bottom of the chin, you know, it's like eye level, and then eyebrows, ears, you know, it's like things like that. You can draw like lines, like parallel lines, and then compare with your reference and see what's missing in there. That's one way to do it. The other way is to actually measure things, right? And I mean, like in real life, when you see those guys sculpting likeness for Madame Tussauds, for example, they're not going to do like just like eyeball everything, right? They're going to try to create something as close as possible to the real deal. And then if they are, for example, like if they're not using, let's say, like a cast or something like that, they're trying to sculpt everything by hand, they're probably going to have the actor coming by. Like I've seen like some sessions, like the actors would come by, and they have the calipers, right? So they're going to be measuring the distance between, you know, it's like eyebrow to the base of the nose, you know, it's like chin to nose, things like that, and capture all those measurements and transfer it to the model. So it's not like they, you know, it's like they're trying to be precious about, you know, it's like reinventing the wheel, right? They're trying to create something that looks very convincing. In my case here, I don't do much of that in terms of comparing all the time. But what I do is when I'm kind of like, okay, now that I struggled a lot with the forms, right? And something is not quite working still. A lot of times for me, like in my case, is the eye position that sometimes is too low in relation to the face. And then when I start bringing them up, all of a sudden things start kind of working. But it's kind of like it's one of my my own pet peeves with my stuff. Normally, that's where I found the problem the most. But then at some point, sometimes I can still not get the likeness. So what I do is just like I bring a reference in the back of on the background here. Then I make the whole interface transparent, right? So I can actually do a little tweak here and there, but without being, you know, it's like anal and really, really trying to nail the eye forms and everything. It's really just to get the eye in position. So basically like making sure that the eye is in the right position, the nose in the right position in relation to the mouth and the chin, right? And then if you have those in place, then basically like you can observe enough, you know, it's like you should be good enough to actually resolve the forms, all the in-betweens, right? It's almost like if you're trying to create like a bigger version of a drawing that you found, right? You're basically like, you're gonna split that drawing into a grid, right? Like you're gonna put inside of a plastic, for example, draw some lines, make a grid, and then you're gonna have all those little squares, and then you're gonna just copy square by square, just like in a bigger version, right? So you're gonna create like a bigger poster from a tiny little picture, for example. So that's kind of like the way I see it, you know? It's like once I have the eyes, base of the nose, and mouth, and then chin, everything else I can figure it out, you know? It's just like to have get that little help in there. Otherwise, it becomes sometimes very, very hard. Sometimes you can nail like pretty straight away. You get lucky, right? And then when you start comparing, it's very, very little off, but sometimes it's very off, right? So in this case here, this guy, I did a little bit of that, but not by much. I mean, like I got like, let's say maybe like 4 days ago, I did a little tweak just to get the eyes in position. And then and the rest of the stuff was kind of okay, actually. But one thing that I do when I'm sculpting likeness is normally at the end of the day after a long day of work. So I work at the island for about like 8 hours, and then plus lunchtime. So like, let's say like 9 hours a day. I don't do a lot of overtime. And so when I get home, I mean, I'm kind of fried with traffic and everything. And that's when I'm doing all those portraits. And then obviously after a couple of hours working on them, at night, you stop like seeing things, right? Like things like your brain starts tricking you, and telling you like those lies. And I was like, oh, it looks great, it looks amazing, and it looks just like the person. And then it was like, oh man, I'm so happy. And I was like, I finally nailed it. And then you go to sleep, and in the morning you look at it, and then it looks like shit. it doesn't look as good as you thought it was. So one thing that I do, and I showed this at the summit actually, is a little trick that it's like when you're doing like 2D work, you're actually flipping side to side, right? Like mirroring things. In the case of 3D, I normally do like upside down stuff. So for example, like I flip my pictures, and I flip my my portrait, right? Like my sculpture upside down, so I can actually start seeing forms in a different way, because your eyes get too used to the forms if you're like looking at it like constantly from the same position, right? I just noticed that the forehead here is pretty pronounced there. I have to tweak it. Yeah, this is another thing that you have to do, right? Like look at your model from all angles, right? Make sure that you look at it from all angles, because sometimes you're gonna find funky stuff, especially like when it comes like to the arch of the arch of the teeth in here, right? In this case here, the smile is not even that strong for me to have this this much compression, so you're gonna have to relax the lips a little bit. It's not compressing that much, but yeah, you start seeing things, by orbiting around, maybe like doing quick renders and stuff like that. But definitely like flip your model from time to time, like if you're really tired at night, because your brain kind of like press the reset button, It's like, oh, this is a brand new model, so it's kind of like a fresh thing. So you start seeing things in a different way, So that's a good little trick there. So let's go back here, and let's take a look at those models, those other the textures I have here, other passes. So what I do here, I normally copy my main base mesh. So for example, like this one here, we subdivided into 1.1 million. In your case, you're gonna have 1.6 million, I believe, if you're using that base mesh. So what I do, I exported the mesh at this level. So let's say like at 1.1, I can just click export here. Let's export it as a high res. So just gonna click array high res here. Let's see. And then what I do, I actually copy this model as another subtool. So for example, like I just do let's just wait until he writes here. Should take just a bit. He's actually writing the information from Polypaint. That's why it takes a little. All right, so now I have this mesh exported, and then I have those other ones here, those other ones. So for example, like if you copied it, so if you had your model selected, every time you click duplicate in here, the HD geometry is not gonna be duplicated. It's just gonna clean up the HD geometry. You're gonna copy just those levels all the way to this point here, 1.1 million, right? So what I did for those characters here, for those other textures, I paint everything in ZBrush. I just duplicated this. So you basically like baked everything, right? Without the HD. And not baked, I mean, you still have the subdivision levels, but, and then from that point on, I subdivided once more. So you see, like I have 1.1 million. So if I wanna import it any time to just adapt this model to the latest changes I just did. So I'm just gonna import it in here. And first it's gonna look like you're losing your textures, but you're actually not. So you just have to click the little, brush in there and then get them back, right? So, so this is one of the textures I painted, which is the specular. And the specular is the one I actually am plugging both into the spec channel in Maya and also in the coat channel, which is like my secondary, very broad, diffuse spec, right? You see like, in this case here, I have like this dark spots right under the eye bags. And you're gonna think like, okay, but the eye bags, they are kind of shiny sometimes, especially like with old people, right? We don't get a lot of that stuff. You get like kind of like this film quality to it, right? It's very, waxy sometimes. So why do I have that? It's because this is completely dependent on another map. That's this map here. So I hope you can see in there. It's very dark. And this map here is the bump height that I mentioned before, right? The bump height, the way it works is like this. So you're using like micro breakup, right? You're using a super thin texture. It can be like a map that you painted, or it can be a noise or something like that, just to break up the surface. And you're gonna try to do that to break up all the spaces in between the pores to add more complexity. So basically, when you do that, the lighting is gonna reflect the different directions, right? And you're gonna get those tiny little sparks in there, sparkles. And then, so for this, in this case here, you wanna make sure, for example, that you don't have a lot of breakup in certain areas that are supposed to be a little bit more shiny, right? So for example, like inside of the eyelids, I don't want any micro displacement happening there. Or in the case of the lips, I don't want any micro displacement in there. Or inside of the nose in here, the nostrils. Or the tip of the nose, you see like the color goes pretty dark, but not all the way to black, right? Because I want some breakup in there, but not a lot of breakup in there. So the way to see this is basically like, if you want a surface to look completely shiny, you're gonna paint the dark, so like those dark areas, they're gonna be a little shinier. And then the white areas are basically the ones that the bump is the highest. So that means it's gonna get more rough, right? Like, so the noise is gonna become more rough. And that way it's gonna diffuse the specular further, right? So if I have areas like this in the neck in here, if I wanted the neck to look a little shinier, I would just paint a little dark in there, right? A little darker. So same for everything else here. So you see, like when it comes to the eye bags in here, my eye bags, I have like a fairly good amount of dark color underneath. It's not like as dark or as the nose, but it's pretty dark. And then, so because this is already gonna become pretty shiny, because I'm not breaking up the surface with noise or with a little map, you know, it's like, or a normal map. If I'm not breaking up that much, that means that all this stuff here is gonna influence this map here as well. So when I'm rendering something in Maya, I have to make sure that I'm actually, it's almost like impossible for you to calculate what's gonna happen when those two maps interact like that. You can have a ballpark, but the only way to see what's going on is when you actually render, right? So when I render my, like doing those like infinite render tests I do during those projects. So in one of those passes, I realized that the eye bags looked a little bit too shiny. And then that's why I start painting darker and darker in here until I got to that point. Same for the mouth, you know, it's like I thought the mouth, like, oh yeah, it's gonna be pretty shiny there. But then I noticed that it was too shiny. So I started like painting darker and darker to get the specular to look a little bit lower than that, right? Tip of the nose, so basically like it's the T-zone, right? Like I should have this area here a little bit more, a little bit wider, just to get the T-zone of like the forehead in here, the nose, right? A bit of the chin. But in this case here, like I said, it's a combination of those two maps that actually makes work, right? And as you can see here, it's pretty dark in here. That means it's gonna get a little bit, very not a little bit, but very shiny already. I'm gonna be more dependent on the displacement map here than the bump map itself, right? The micro bump, because everything that's black in here is basically the bump map is completely eliminated. So so that's how my map looks like for the bump height. So you can have like a visual idea in there. And to paint this, there is no mystery. Everything here is using like a regular standard brush. So, you know, it's like without any alpha assigned to it. And when I paint stuff in ZBrush, I try to use a very low intensity. So for example, like I start with the base color, let's say like this gray, right? I would start with something like this, like a gray color. And then for, you know, those other areas, the funny thing here is if I go completely black, you're gonna see something happening here with ZBrush, which is a bug. So if I go completely black, look what's gonna happen. It switches my my shader. It goes from flat color, it goes to, you know, blend or whatever. So if I go a little bit more than black, you know, it's like a little bit lighter than black, then it goes back to this. I don't know why it does that, but it's kind of funky. So to paint it is basically like very broad strokes, you know. See, it's still a little bit too strong. So let's try with the 1 in here. So very broad strokes, like painting the cheeks in here, right? That's basically how I did this whole thing. Like, I mean, there's no mystery here. It's just like a very simple brush. When you need like areas like the lips in here, right? Just go with the smaller brush and just paint. You get like all this blackness in there, right? It's like there's no mystery here. I don't think I need to do a tutorial. I think more important here is actually the where things are painted, you know? So like a visual reference for you guys. Basically, that's how I did it. But again, like for example, if you're painting the specular map a little differently from this, they both gonna work together. So you're probably gonna have some variation in relation to this, right? But this is a good ballpark to start with if you wanna have a reference. So again, like the darker areas are the shinier areas. Let's say like the most oily areas or wet, or the most wet areas, right? And then the wider parts are actually the ones that are supposed to be more rough. So you're gonna have more breakup in between the pores. That's the logic behind it. So when you go to the specular pass in here, you see everything is, it's pretty much, it's a noise, right? Another thing that I did here, for example, when I duplicate this mesh, I had 1.1 million, right? But I subdivided one more time for each one of those subtools. I have one subdivision more. So I have about 4.4 million polygons, and that's it. So it doesn't go further than that. It's overkill to do this stuff in HD, so don't need to go HD, and don't need to go too high either, you know? This is like, just imagine this. I mean, like you have the displacement map that you're assigning with all that breakup already in place, right? Like with all the pores and everything, you have the wrinkles. So that's breaking up the surface pretty good. And then you have the micro displacement or micro bump applied. It's gonna break even further. And then you wanna add a little bit more variation for the specular, so it's not like a plain specular, which is gonna look completely plasticky, right? That's why I paint stuff using noise here. Right? So basically, like it's just a noise, and making sure that I'm hitting the areas that I need more specular, obviously, a little bit wider, right? So my settings are kind of like this. So you're just gonna go to your spray, right? You get the spray in there, and you can use, for example, you can use this alpha 70 here. It has a little bit of, you see like the little dots in there. So let's say in one area like this, I'm gonna go like what, 100% so I can actually see what I'm doing. I'm gonna go full white in here. So let's see how it looks like. See, like, so that's the kind of spray effect that we are looking for. It's very strong, obviously, here. And then if I go, for example, like smaller, right? You're gonna see stuff like that. If I want more space in between this stuff, I can show you a trick in here. So you see, like, it's still a little bit too heavy-handed, right? Things that I do normally, like for both, like when I'm sculpting detail to get some randomness, and also for textures, and I'm going to do this a lot with albedo, is to vary the intensity and the size of the brush. So for example, if I have something around like, let's say 30 here, so I'm going to get like something bigger like that, bigger detail, right? But then I can come with something much stronger and smaller and do another pass on top of that, right? So every time you mix those things, for example, like you can come like with the very, very broad ones and then a very low intensity, let's say 18, and very big like this, then you gotta get this type of effect, right? So every time you do this kind of stuff, like use a lot of variation, you know? It's never enough, especially when you're painting the colors for the face. We're gonna be doing this probably on Tuesday, because on Monday we are supposed to actually start looking at the sculpture of the iris and the shaders for the eyes. The windows of the soul is very important, so we're gonna do this first, and then we're gonna jump into the color painting. But you're gonna see this a lot. You know, I'm gonna do this a lot during that class. That's gonna be or that session. That's gonna be like using those variations. You know, it's like color variation and actually intensity variation, right? And the size variation. Another way is to do this. So you see like my alpha here, it looks a little bit kind of like the dots are very tiny. It's because my alpha is actually cranked with that little curvature in there. You can actually bring it back if you want to have more of the detail, right? And show like that. So that's even, you know, it's like you get more of the spray itself, right? But then there's another way you can do this. You can use an alpha, let's say alpha again, like my favorite, right? For some reason, 39, and I'm gonna make it tiny again, and make it just a little point like that. And then if you use it with the spray, that's basically what I'm getting right now. And you see, this is still very, very, it's a lot of you know, it's like it's too much. The spray is too strong at this point. So what you can do, you can actually play with those settings here. You can go to, for example, the flow, you bring all the way down from 0.25 to 0, completely 0, right? And then the placement, let's try without changing the placement. And if it's still too strong, you can play with it. So I'm gonna bring it to 100 so you can see the effect. Still here in the back. So now you're starting to see this type of effect. So it's basically like just one single to 39, right? And then mixed with the space, right? Like not the space, but with how you call the flow. So the placement now I can actually increase it. So let's say instead of like 0.5, let's crank it a little bit more. So now get a little bit more spread out. So this one here, for example, is kind of like the basis of if I want to paint, for example, stubble. I have a similar brush that I already have built that it works similarly to this one. I can even make a little sharper. For example, bring this one all the way down here. And then you get this tiny little dots like that. And again, like this goes back to the whole thing about using gesture, right? So I'm not like working like in lines here. Everything is in circles. So I'm actually making circles like that. And then creating the whole pattern with circles. So this type of stuff, if you want to really go to town, for example, in an area like the nose, right, where you're going to need more specular, that's basically what I did there. So, you know, it's like, especially in the nose here, you turn off the symmetry, obviously, so you don't get like any pattern. But I think it's going to be very hard to detect the pattern, even if it's symmetrical, you know, because of all the breakup that's on top of it, like with displacement and micro bump and everything. So if I want to do in the eyes here, right? If I need a little specks in there, that's basically what you get. So like with this little brush, I actually prefer this one with a single one like that better than this one here, right? I actually prefer the simple one, very sharp. And working in circles like this, I can get like a nicer result. So and then that's basically how I paint this entire thing. You know, it's like it's always working in circles like that and changing variation of color and intensity. So again, like I can go lower in intensity and making my brush much bigger here. Let's test on the back and or even like in the bottom here. So for example, the effect's going to be totally different, right? You're going to get this type of stuff. And then if you have like big like that, and then you're going to go with a little smaller like that in another layer. And then you're going to increase your intensity. You're going to go even smaller. You see, like it starts becoming almost like there are like layers of stuff, you know. It's like you can see depth when you do this way. So you can see like there is depth, you know. It's like it's almost like you're creating some kind of like bump map, like very dark in there. And that's basically like the way I paint the entire thing, you know. And then obviously if it's an area like this one, I'm gonna try to saturate more with more white. You know, it's like I could have a little bit more white, for example, like in the forehead, right? Get my T-zone in there. I could just like go there and saturate with more white. But again, it's already working because it's working in combination with my other map. And you see that the ears, for example, I don't even add like all those little dots too tiny, right? To make it a little bit more blurry. So you can blur things by just like using your blur, but instead of like the Z add, you just click RGB instead. And then you can blur things, right? So you can actually blend them. And intensity, you don't need to use 100%, of course. You can use like something like, let's say, 20%. And then you can get a nice little blend and get some of those areas a little bit more, you know, if you need something a little bit more natural, right? But in this case here, for example, I want to make sure that you know, when I render stuff, I want to catch those little specks from the spray. So that's why it's very exaggerated, because it's going to be below all the displacement and all that stuff. But you see, like when I start smoothing things out, it becomes almost like a, you know, it's like I said before, it's almost like a bump map, right? Because of all those layers that we added. You know, it's like with stuff that's a little bit more, a little stronger and smaller on top of stuff that's bigger and a little bit, you know, more blurry. So that's basically like the technique I use. So not a lot of mystery here. So the spray again, the placement here, placement is pretty high. And then the trick here is to bring the flow from 0.25 all the way to 0. And then this one is the alpha 39. And then the alpha is tweaked to have a little point like that. That's basically the spray I'm gonna use the most for this stuff, you know. Just gonna do this one. Let's see. Or I can just reopen my file. It's gonna be better because I saved it so I can actually mess with it. So I showed this one here, so visual reference for you guys. Again, like very simple, no need for spray. It's just a simple standard brush with dots and then no alpha, right? And this one here, mostly spray, and then with the tiny alpha, 39, right? And then the last one is this one here that we're not gonna look just now. This one is actually one that I didn't have before, and I added this one just for the Stan model, for the Stan Winston, because I wanna like a way to control the melanin color for all the fur and the hair in the entire head. And because I'm grooming everything from the head itself, so I wanted to have a control, for example, like everything that's, it's the opposite here. So everything that's white, that means it has a ton of melanin to it. And in that case, like it's gonna become a black hair. And everything that's black in here is basically like, it has very little melanin, so it's gonna be white hair, right? So it's just like adding variations to it. So you're gonna get like some hairs that are a little darker, some are a little bit wider. So you're gonna get some kind of like a, you know, salt and pepper effect, right? And I thought that would be a cool way to test it, and it actually worked very well. So when you look at the renders of Stan Winston, you're gonna see like another thing that you have to be careful too is when I was looking at the references, his eyebrows, they are, for example, like they look like black around here and then white around there. But then when I tried to paint there, obviously the roots are not located in there. The roots are located in here. So they looked black around here because the roots started right there. So it's kind of like you have to plan that offset, you know. But we're gonna talk about this like when we start actually doing the hair stuff. But in terms of maps painted, that's gonna be all I have. So I'm gonna have like 4 maps to create the results that I create. So not complicated at all. And like I said, like this entire thing has room for improvement. So if you feel the necessity of creating different maps, I would do the same way. You know, it's like just create a duplicate of your mesh, you know, and then don't subdivide too much, like just like maybe up to 4 to 5 million polygons, just so you can get some of that spray effect. And then that's all we're gonna need, you know. We're gonna have like those 3 maps plus the color map that's gonna be this one here. And this one here is the albedo I painted for Stan, but that's the one we're gonna be painting next week. And his skin color was darker than the skin color for Ray. And also this is not HD because I didn't transfer the HD stuff. In HD you can actually see very, very tiny details. But in this case here, it's just like, see, it's even like it's stretched because it's not the same character. So it's almost like he's wearing someone's skin, right? So it's gonna look a little funky. So let's go back and see what we can do when it comes to the pores stuff, because I saw that you guys are having a little trouble with pores, and I decided like, okay, why not do a little tutorial? Let me just bring this one here so I can have a little reference. And we can start with this. Let's see, plane. Let's make a polymesh 3D right there. And then let's subdivide, let's see the grid here. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 times. So 1.1 million polygons. If I want to go crazy, I can subdivide one more and then and have like 4 million polygons. So that's going to be my base for my pore in here. And then let's tweak this same brush here. Let's say, let's get the drag rectangle. So we're gonna get like a standard brush with drag rectangle. And then for the alpha, you can pick something like, let's say 37, 36. I think 37 is a good one for that. So 37. And then I'm gonna tweak this, this guy here to have a little point like that, right? Let's see what type of result you get if we do something like that. I have to try it and see what happens. Yeah, it's gonna give a nice little point. Yeah, not too bad. So that's basically like a little cone, right? Like it has a little fall off. Basically, like what's doing here is just using this little curvature in here just to create that little fall off at the end, right? So, but it's very simple, right? It doesn't look like a butthole just yet. So we're gonna do this. Let's, okay, I already showed you the settings for this, right? So I just did this one with a little curvature like that. I used alpha, what was that, 37, right? And then the drag rectangle. So we start with that on your plane. And then let's switch this to dots again. And I can get my alpha 39. That's my favorite there. Let's see if my stroke is set. Yeah, it's lazy mouse is at the lazy step 0.02. And then I can start doing some sculpting here. So let's start like just sculpting without, let's get the intensity a little bit lower here. So it's gonna be like a little bit of a sketch, right? I'm gonna try not to go like too straight with the line. So I'm gonna just add a little wobble when I'm doing. And I'm just trying to copy the reference I have. That's my own pour that I did before. Oh, let me just go back to this one. And let me get this intensity. Okay, so let's get this one. So I did not a lot of cuts in here. Let's see how many I did. I did this one. And actually, I'm actually modulating my pressure, right? So it's starting very strong and then starting to flare out a little bit less, like that. And then smooth out at the ends, like that. Let's see another one. Something like that. And then that got a little too strong. So let's try that. And then the last one seems like it's a little bit more like that. That's the thing, you know, it's like instead of like making perfect stars, you want to make sure that you have some variation. You know, some are a little closer than others, so it doesn't look something that's too similar, you know. Because if you do this way, if you apply them with that little technique, you know, it's like the spin thing. Every time you place one, you just spin a little bit. Then things start to work, you know. So now from here we can go to the clay buildup, and in the clay buildup you can switch to this alpha 36, for example, something like that, more rounded instead of the default square one. And my intensity, it's around 2 right now. Let's make my focal shift smaller as well, and then I can start building up those areas. So I'm gonna just make sure like when you get to the very top of it, that you don't do too much in there. Don't add too much volume coming out. I'm gonna add a little bit, but it's almost like I prefer digging those volumes down than actually building them up too much, you know. So I'm gonna just like try to fill up those little pillows in here, but without building up the top too much. Just gonna build up some of that. Same here. See, like when I'm getting too close to the border in here, I kind of stop because I don't want to inflate too much, like overboard, you know, it's like go overboard with it. And you know, from the profile, I don't want too much stuff popping out. When everything kind of contained within this little cone. So if I have something like this, now what I'm gonna do, I'm gonna reverse it. And I'm gonna just bring down those wrinkles like to make them broader and deeper, like all together. So I'm gonna go to a lower resolution like that, for example. I can go even to this one. And I'm gonna dig those guys pretty good. So let's see, intensity lower. So let's say 6 or 7. A big brush, so I can make it very big. And I can just dig those guys pretty good. Just make sure that they actually, you know, it's like read like those bigger pillows, right? Something like that. And now the magic thing is to actually use a little bit of the inflate, right? You can use a little bit of inflate right there with a very low intensity, let's say like 2. And let's go one subdivision more. And in this case here, if it penetrates, it doesn't matter too much, right? Because we are capturing this in this axis, like facing the camera. So it doesn't matter too much, you know, if it intersects a little bit. But yeah, if you can avoid, even better. So I'm gonna just like with the move brush, just bring those things a little bit closer together like that. Even from the side here, if you want to tweak from the side, you can do that too. Actually, let me turn on the double side. So it doesn't need to be perfect, you know. It's like it's actually better if it's not that perfect. So now we have that guy. I'm gonna smooth it out a little bit. Too strong. Let's see. Smooth that. Let's see, intensity 10. Just relax it a little bit. And then now we can actually start like thinking about the secondary stuff, right? Because now we have a little bit of the forms in here in place. And then we're gonna need some of the secondary stuff to actually help to break up the surface when we have it super, you know, it's like when this is like applied together with each other, like the little network. So I'm gonna use this standard again. And then let's try like with intensity of something like 9 or 10. Let's go to a resolution a little bit lower. Actually, this one should be good. And I'm just gonna add some lines cutting from, you know, this maybe a little bit more resolution. Let's get some of those lines cutting and starting to branch out. So some coming like from here, branching out. You can actually cross them if you want. Some bigger ones and then branching. For example, if you cut one like this, you can actually use the clay build-up in the middle and actually build that little pillow in between there. So I can do like a small line like that and then use another brush and come with another pass. So I'm gonna just do this. So like a small line, like thin, another one thin in here. I'm gonna break up, let's say from here to here. And then from there, just to add some breakup in between things, you know. So same here, let's see, the little branching out. That, I mean, like this stuff here is just like I said before, like it's idealized, right? Like it's not like we are gonna be completely, you know, it's like precise about anything here. It's gonna be something that should work, but without like too much stress, right? Because I know like when you don't see the results straight away, it's kind of frustrating. But you know, it's like it's the matter of like really sculpting one version and then applying a bunch of times. You know, it's like transform this into an alpha, apply a couple of times and see how it works. And then if you feel that it needs more breakups in between stuff, then you can actually add that, right? Like and do it another time. So I'm gonna add like some other stuff a little bit more broad like that. Let's see, something like, even like around here, you can add some little cuts. Let's see, maybe from here. Just to really mess up those little surfaces. And then now I'm gonna pick a couple of those and I'm gonna make them a bit stronger. But always respecting the hierarchy, right? Because this part here is the one we really wanna read, right? That is right in the middle in there. And everything else shouldn't read too much. There should be like the main little hole in there. And then those little guys here should read a little bit more. And then those guys should be a little bit less than that. So right now, I'm just gonna pick another brush, like another intensity. So instead of 10, I'm gonna use, let's say 4. I'm gonna make much bigger. And I'm gonna go back to those little guys, back and forth. So I can actually just add a little bit more of, you know, it's like a little bit more of an organic feel to them, right? I'm gonna go over them with a bigger brush, but a smaller intensity. Just dig in like that. So instead of like building up, we are creating similar effect of something soft by going down, right? So basically like you go down with it. I'm just gonna go over those little lines. So it's basically like 2 passes. I do this for wrinkles a lot in the face as well. So you sculpt with a thin one and then come, or the opposite, start with a very broad one, like a very big like that, and then come with a thin one at the top. But you know, it's like some faint ones like that. So now we have something that it has more detail than my actual pour that I did before, but I think it's going to be a good one to test. So I can do some tests, like let's try that. Bring it a little bit further outside because we're gonna be using a radial fade. So I'm just gonna bring this all the way out like that. So that should be good for a test. And then I can even inflate a little bit more, maybe like one of those sides. Let's see. Let's inflate this. Yeah, something like that. So we can test it, you know? So we see like, I don't have a lot of stuff going on at the top. It's fairly flat at the top, but then all the detail to create those pillows is actually carving like twice, right? I carve just like with the thin one and then a little bit more broad brush and to create something more organic. And then you come with the inflate and make sure that everything gets pretty pillowy, right? Something like that. They close the gaps, and we're gonna be capturing this with whatever technique we want. So in this case here, let's try that. So if I feel later that this is too much detail around those things, I can definitely come back here, right? And then do some tweaking and then recapture it. But for our first test, let's do this. So let me make sure that the perspective is off, right? So perspective is off here. The depth looks like this. So it's gonna be all dependent on like how we're gonna capture it to get like more or less depth when you have your brush actually created. So let's make like, I'm gonna make it pretty big here in the screen. And we saw like some different techniques to actually capture this, right? Either with the alpha, there's another trick that Omid actually, he said, you know, it's like you create the 3D version of it. And there's the old school way of doing it, which is this one here that I'm gonna do right now because I am old. So let's do, for example, from here, you're gonna switch to this guy. It's called the MRGBZ grabber, right? And it's gonna switch to 2D. I'm gonna just click right here in the middle visually, let's see, right here. And then as I drag, I'm gonna press Shift just to make a square. And I can go a little bigger like that. And then release. I don't need this texture, so get rid of it. And then the alpha is right there. So right now, let's go back to our plane that we had before, this one. Let's draw it again. Edit, and then press Control-N to clear up the rest stuff. So we are back to our little plane in there. Actually, let's create a new one, but I don't want to mess up with this one. So plane 3D, let's make polymesh, subdivide, million polygons. And then let's switch to our standard brush. And I'm gonna get my drag rectangle, and I'm gonna assign this new map that I created. It looks very dark in the middle in there because of this curvature in here that we have to reset. So you just press reset right here. You should reset it for you. So now it looks nicer. Another thing that I do, for example, like the radial fade, I actually make it at 10. So it creates this little blurry effect around it. But you see that now if I try to apply it, you're gonna see it's gonna pop out. Let's see alpha. So you see the butthole is popping out, right? So that's not what we want. So you go to the alpha, and you can actually tweak this mid value here. And then you're gonna see visually the border is getting lighter and lighter. So that, let's see, around like maybe like 80 or 85, something around here. Let's try that. Still popping out a little bit, so you can actually go and just do let's crank all the way to 95. So that's better. So just going in, right? So now we have the pore set up. So let's try to apply a couple of times. If it's too strong, let's see. So if it's too strong, let's see how deep it's going. It looks a little strong, right? So let's make it less strong. So let's put that 40. And let's do a little sculpting here. So go like that. And the next one, because we want to make sure that we're spinning around when you're applying, right, in different directions. And then having kind of like a constant, you know, not constant, but like a fairly decent pattern, right? They have to actually look like they are reaching to the next one with those little pillows. And remember that this is just the first step, right? Like we create just this fairly basic skin, just for later on to actually start playing with the variations of the, you know, the depth and all the stuff that goes in between, right? So let's do this. So now we have a little array in there. It's pretty small. If I want to create another brush with this array baked in it, so I don't need to sculpt one by one, but rather like use a pattern like that, you can do that as well. But just make sure you sculpt bigger so you have more resolution. So unlike what I'm doing here, you would sculpt like something like probably like a nice little array, you know, that looks more like that. Or here. And then capture like make like a circle, right? Like something more circular. And then capture that way the same way and make another brush, and then you're ready to go. And then obviously here, we are just like, let's make like the bigger example here. So if you have something like that, right? And you see like I still have room for some detail in the middle of all this stuff. So what you can do, you can use some of the techniques I showed you guys the other day. For example, you can use this little brush here, the skin random, like this one here, right? With the spray. And then, like I said before, I mean, like if you apply this in circles, you can get some very interesting details. So you can break it up like that, look. Just in circles, you know? So you can get this nice little leathery pattern. Those ones maybe look a little bit too distant from each other, right? But then you have like this guy's here, a little pattern in there. So it's more there's more breakup in between, right? Looks more organic. It's gonna look nicer in the render. And then obviously all the other stuff we spoke about yesterday when we were doing the you know, the tests we did. So for example, like the pore depth elastic, that's the one I created yesterday, right? It was just like to create this exaggeration of the depth, right? So it creates this type of effect like that. I'm gonna make it bigger here so you can see. Creates that kind of depth, right? So you can actually do that, and you pick a couple of those, you know, it's like make some of those pores deeper. So we're gonna pick some of those little ones here. Let's make even deeper. Some variation there. Here, bigger. And then we created a variation of that brush that was actually the positive version of it was this pimple elastic, right? So we made it a little bit more like that. So same deal. I mean, like you can do this, increase the intensity so you can have something like that. You can even tweak your focal shift in here to create something a little bit more pimply like that, right? And then you can come, for example, you have his skin. When I add some, you know, interest in there, stuff like that, you can add, you know, it's like little pimples here and there. You can add tiny ones. Again, very important, a variation of intensity and scale, right? That's the stuff that's going to add like more interest, you know. And then obviously you can come up after you have something like this, and then you can come up with a regular brush, alpha 39. Let's reset the entire thing here. So my mid value go back to 0. Tweak this one. I have my brush in there, cool. So let's reduce that. So now we can actually come up and add more stuff. You know, it's like you can actually pick some of them, and then, you know, it's like add more connections if you want to. So for example, like the skin is actually just the base for everything, right? So don't think that just assigning the skin the way we assigned with those little alphas is going to do the whole job for you. Sometimes you just have to go and just add more variations, you know, it's like you can cut stuff in a different way. For example, when we were sculpting wrinkles yesterday, right? We're actually connecting the dots. So for example, in this case here, would go from 1 to 1 here, and then change direction, go from this one to this one, start adding some more organic feel to it, right? So all this stuff here, I mean, like it considered this like it's almost like a character, right? That she's sculpting. It's like a creature, right? So obviously, you're gonna have to pick your battles. For example, if it's an area of like a very critical area, for example, like the cheeks, right? That's very visible. The cheeks are very visible. You're probably gonna need to do some stuff like that. You know, it's like sculpt some stuff by hand and add some pimples. You know, it's like I can add some scars from time to time. You know, it's like I can add a little scar like that, and then build a little border around it, something like that. I was like, you can have things like that, like just to add more interest to the skin, you know. Just don't think that just by adding the pores, magically everything is gonna work and look great, because I mean, like, this is gonna take some work, you know. This bigger example here, you know, I can start, you know, it's like reaching those little connections a little bit further, you know, breaking up stuff, like even adding like some lines in between like that. And that's the kind of stuff you can actually add when you're building your alpha, right? You can add something that's more like a crossing over, because all this stuff is going to help when you're sculpting this. And then instead of like doing this that I'm doing right now, that's basically like sculpting stuff by hand, if you have some of that stuff build up into your pore brush, then this stuff is going to look better, you know. Just be careful with the patterns, right? Like make sure that everything is it makes a little bit of sense. But yeah, I mean, like, this is I think is a quick tutorial just to give you guys an idea about how it is, you know. But it's all we did like in a couple of minutes, right? Like just to do it. I think it's the most important part is to actually to pay attention to the hierarchy of the form, right? You want to make sure that the deepest part is right there in the middle, but that the middle is just like it has this hierarchy, right? It's the deepest part, and you have those little rays a little bit deeper at the beginning here, but then they fade away, right? And then that little trick that I mentioned to you guys, it's very important, right? Like sculpt a line that's very strong, for example, in thin, right? Like that. And then you switch your intensity to something very low, like 3 or 4, and bring your brush, make it very big, and you do it again over the same stuff, right? You start adding this type of like very organic feel to it. So basically, like if you build things like that, you should get a good result, you know. That should help you guys. I think that's kind of it for the brush, for the pore stuff. Just don't get too obsessive with pores. Like, oh, it's gonna look awesome from the get-go. You know, sometimes do a few passes. You know, a few tests. This is the one I sculpted, right? This is the one I used for my characters. Like, it's even simpler than the one I just did, and it works fine. You know, it's just yeah, you see, like it's pretty random. It has those patterns. Like the thing to avoid is to create perfect stars, right? And I did a little bit of that in here. It's a little bit too perfect of stars. But if you have something that's a little bit more distorted, and especially like this, you know, I think when I sculpted that one, the thing that I made sure I did was to actually bringing some of those forms kind of like this, you know, just play with them. Not like that, but you know, it's like make sure that things are a little bit more wobbly and not perfect, you know. If you need to get some of them closer to the others and then some of them a little bit more distant, then you do that, you know. But yeah, some variation like that, you can definitely help. Like try to avoid like the little star effect, you know. I saw some of the tests that some of my other students did, and it was kind of like, yeah, they looked a little bit of little stars, you know. It's like they're too perfect. But if you start adding some more variation to them, you should be, you know, you should get better results. But at the end of the day, you know, those are pores, and when you render everything, it's expected that everything is going to wash out, right, because of the subsurface scattering. But what has to stick is that the pore is going to be visible, so like the inside of the pore has to be deep enough so the scatter can go inside, and the breakups in between is basically like the specular is going to break up. And we have some beautiful examples already in our group. That's some of our fine folks posted, so you guys can take a look. And I think that's about it for, you know, this type of stuff. I'm gonna go back to the model itself. I'm gonna be doing some more work in here and hopefully exploring some different techniques to build up more form, right? Like we are still in the process of sculpting detail. And we should be, actually we are good for questions. If you guys have questions, I can go over anything that's still missing for you. And let me just get to HD here. Still chasing the likeness. Hopefully with once I have the secondary stuff, it's gonna look a little bit more like the guy.
Hey, Chris.
Hello.
How's it going?
Good, how are you, man?
Thanks, I'm fine.
Yeah.
I have a question about a specular map and the other one. It was, I believe, bump height.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
Uh-huh.
Uh,
This one.
I saw you. You're controlling your specular map or glossiness or this kind of thing. Two maps.
Yes.
One specular map, one bump height.
Mm-hmm.
But I didn't get it perfectly which kind of a specular you are controlling in which map.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so I have let me show you. Let me get this one here. This one has the same stuff applied, so that's the
Mhm.
same scene. And let's explore the this one. So let's get to this and let's grab it, this shader network. So that's basically the shader network. And then let's go here. Let's maximize it. And let's see. So when I get here to the bump 3D, right? So for the
Mhm.
bump value, that's where I'm gonna have my noise assigned, right? Like the AI noise. So it's from Arnold with all
Yeah.
those settings. And then if you go back one, oh, it's always hard in here. So let's go back to this one here. So if I go back to the previous one, under bump depth, so that's where I'm gonna plug that map. So basically like this one here, it's the bump height 6, right? So if I press view here, that's basically that map, right? So it's like black and white and then same map. And then the only thing I did differently here is that I noticed that sometimes you don't see anything. I have alpha is luminous in here. And with the exposure that's 0, I wasn't seeing anything. It wasn't making any difference. So I actually cranked the exposure to 5. And then I was able to start seeing things, the difference. We can do this test right here. Look, let's hide everything but this guy. So let's,
Honestly, my actual question was about, for example, you want somewhere in the character be a bit shinier.
yeah,
Uh,
uh-huh.
which map would you like to change at that time?
Yeah, I would change that map. This the same the bump height map first. I'm gonna show you here. Let me try to do like with a practical example here. Let's see. Let's just hide this stuff. And I'm gonna keep just this one. I'm gonna assign another different shader in here. So let's see. I created extra shader just for test. So bump test, this one. So if I assign it, what this bump test has is basically is the same stuff. Let's see if I can frame this one. So you see the same bump that I have assigned for my skin is the same one that I'm actually assigning to this bump test here. So basically like I plug it to both shaders. So anything I do with this one here for test actually is gonna work back to my skin, right? It's plugged in both. So let's do a test here. Let's see with this gray shaded um, shader here. So let's see how it turns out in the render, because I was doing some tests yesterday. Let's see this one, not this one, this one. So let's do a little test in here. Let's get it. It should be fast because it doesn't have a lot of stuff. So this one has the bump height plugged, right? So let's look closely and let's turn off some lights here too. So let's get this one, the HDRI, let's turn it off. And for my lighting for that scene, you guys saw the renders here. Just out of curiosity for this one here, I'm just using like a 3-point light, which is like one from the side here, a window with the bigger intensity, this one with the lower intensity, and then just a backlight, and then a HDRI just for reflections, but that's basically what I'm using right now. So let me just turn off a couple of them, or at least like make very, very low intensity like this one here. Let's see. So you can actually see more stuff. Let's bring it down. Let's see this one, okay? So let's bring it very close. And let's look at a contrast area like a nose versus mouth. Let's see if we can actually capture the detail in the render. So you see how shiny the mouth is here? Actually, what's happening here is that I have the displacement plugged as well. I'm just unplug the displacement. because I don't want any displacement. I want to see just the bump. So this guy here. It's funny because I don't have displacement plugged to that shader, but it's still rendering. Let me try to just update the scene and see. Or I can just like eliminate in my model properties as well, but just make sure. This is one thing that happens sometimes if you're messing with your scene a lot. Sometimes you have to actually click update full scene, because Arnold has to flush all the caches he has. So sometimes it's needed, you know. So let's see if that doesn't resolve. I can just go back and turn off the, yeah, it seems like this one doesn't have the displacement now. Yeah, this is just the bump height. So check this thing out. Let's see if I can get pretty close here. Let's see, the render is gonna keep resolving. Yeah, it's starting to render in here. So look at this one here. So this one has that little noise being controlled by that map. And then when you get right here in the lips, it basically like it goes almost completely black, right? And then when it goes around the nose around here, it goes pretty dark, but not completely black. So you're still gonna get a little bit of the detail, but not a lot. And then when you get around the cheeks in here, it should be pretty much like much rougher, right? So basically I control the roughness of the surface using that map, the bump height map. So if I want something shinier, gonna be blacker. If it's something a little bit more rough, it's gonna be the other, the white one, right? And then here, let's see, when I get to the specular stuff, because this one now is a very simple shader. It doesn't have the other maps assigned to it. So I'm just using, like, I have no coat in here. See, before we actually creating the effect of the broad kind of reflection by using the coat, right? We're using the coat with a very high roughness at the 0.450, I believe. But this one is a very shiny surface. See, like I'm using 0.1, which should be very, very glossy, as you can tell by looking at the lips, right? But when you get to those areas here, for example, you see I'm modulating the surface to look more rough. So I'm basically like mimicking the effect of using like a high roughness in here by using a surface breakup, which is the micro displacement or micro bump that I'm using. So basically that's the way I use it, you know. Does that make sense for you?
Mm-hmm. So you are treating the roughness with like the real world.
Exactly. Yeah.
Yeah.
Try
then
to...
if you want to add another layer of kind of unrealistic specular, you add it in specular, man.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah. So if you have the specular, it looks more like a spray, right? Then you're gonna get this extra layer of stuff. So we can do this right now. Actually, I never tested, but we can do it. So let's just let's store the snapshot. And I love doing those tests, actually, you know, because it makes more clear for you guys to see what's going on. So let's go to, since I have just a spec, I don't have a code in here. Let's just click this weight and just plug it right here. So let's file, no filter, and this gonna turn off as usual the TX stuff. And then let's just grab the roughness. So let's see, let's go to F. Personal projects. And where is the guy? It's so many, I forgot the names. And then this one's gonna be the source images. And I have my color, bump height, and then should have spec. So spec is still old here. So that's my spec map. I exported yesterday actually from the same model. So let's plug that one and see if we get a little bit more of a breakup. I don't have anything tweaked in here. Let's see if it's gonna do it or if I'm gonna have to switch to alpha as luminance. Oh, actually, I forgot. You have to actually change this one to UDIM. Otherwise, you're not gonna see. It's just gonna make like one part of the model, but not the entire thing. So I'm not seeing any difference in there. So let's try to turn on the alpha as luminance here. Now I'm seeing it. So alpha is luminous is actually doing the job. So what I'm gonna do here, I can actually crank the exposure of it. And now you start seeing more and more of it. See, like all the way to super shiny. So I can actually control that and get like a sweet spot here, let's say. Like this. And let's see if we're gonna see any difference between the breakups in one in relation to the other one. So we have that one to compare. Actually, let's try to mimic the same amount of speck in the nose. Around here, yeah, something like that. So all those things combined, you know, it's like this little pass here is very important to just like see what's going on with it. And you saw that the thing that I had to do was actually crank the exposure, even for this little guy, right, for the bump itself. So if I look at the bump in here, so it's under geometry and then noise, I'm gonna go back one time, and then bump depth. So I had to crank it to 5 in order to see what was going on in there, right? So it depends on how intense you're gonna paint in ZBrush, but if you're not seeing the results straight away, I would suggest just like playing with exposure and cranking it so you can see it. So here's very interesting already. So you see like those little dots in here, like you see like a little speck variations. It's already much different from the one we had before, right? You get like all those little interesting surfaces in there. And the lips, because I said before, I had it super shiny at the beginning, but then I decided to paint a little bit darker in my specular map. And basically, like you know, if your character has like drier lips, you don't want to get something that looks glossy, right? Like for example, if you have a female with like using like lip gloss, you want something like this. But if it's a dude and someone old, probably like the lip's gonna look a little bit more flat, right? So this is the difference between using the specular map with the little dots and then not using it, and both with the micro bump. Now imagine this with the displacement map as well, and then you're gonna get even another layer of variation, right? So anything you can do to add variation, that's how he's gonna break up that that impression that everything is plasticky, right? You don't want to go like with the plastic kind of look. So yeah, I hope he answered your question.
Yeah, fully answered.
Awesome, man. Yeah. Yeah, this is fun to play with, man. Like the specular is very important, and then obviously later on you're gonna be playing with. Let's add, since we are here, since we're doing tests, let's do this again. So let's do a star snapshot. So now we have a comparison between those two, and let's do another one here. Let's go back to this one, and we're gonna plug the coat. So let's plug the coat in here, and we're gonna use the same specular map. So again, you're gonna turn off this one, and then turn off filter, bring it to specular. And then I might have to crank the exposure as well, but let's see how it looks like. So I have the roughness at 0.1. I'm gonna crank this one to 0.450. That's the one I had before. And let's add a little bit more of a broad speck to it. So without, oh, forgot another thing. Forgot, as usual, to turn on my UDIM, right? Otherwise, it's not gonna find all the tiles. So now I'm seeing some more speck in this very broad speck. So it's kind of like an additional layer on top of that roughness control that I have using the bump map and the bump height map. And now I have an extra layer that's basically like this you know, very broad speck that I'm using, like the coat as a way to create the secondary speck, right? So now I have that layer in there that's adding some interesting extra stuff going on in there. So I can actually modulate as well by playing with the values like, let's say if I use the alpha is luminous, and I can just play with, let's see, the alpha gain. I'm seeing a little bit difference. Alpha gain right there is like very, very subtle. And I can play with this guy here as well to get more or less of the specular I'm looking for. So this one's gonna limit to, yeah, it actually goes further than 1. Interesting. I thought it would lock at 1, but yeah. So let's see this one, how it resolves. So this is the original one. This one is the one with the specular map. Start rendering right there. Actually, no, just here, just right there. So this one now has a little bit of that. Let's see if it's going to do anything different. Still rendering. And then the next thing after this one here we can do, we can actually plug that little effect that's the sheen and see if you get a little bit of that effect of Fresnel. That's to simulate the fuzzy surfaces like velvet and stuff like that. I normally get most of that effect with Peach Fuzz itself because I try to do everything kind of physically. Like you said, I mean, like control the roughness like it would happen in the real life, right? Like if it's a surface that has more breakup in it, it's going to obviously look more diffuse, the specular. And then if it's something that has no detail at all, then it's going to be a little bit shinier. But let's see. Yeah, between those two, there's a tiny little layer of specularity right now that's like a broad speck that's covering the whole thing. You can see like very, very subtle, but it's definitely there between this and this one. And then obviously I can crank it, right? Like if I keep cranking the exposure or playing with the alpha gain, then I can get like a even further with the effect. But let's see, let's wait just a second here until we resolve a little bit of this area so we have a good comparison base. And then we can actually switch to the sheen stuff, which is going to be probably not going to be that visible right here. You're going to be seeing probably like more towards the edges, but still, let's see, original plus spec map, and then original spec map plus coat right here. It's so subtle between the two of them. It just adds a little extra glow to everything, which looks very nice when you do the renders actually. Like a little glow. So yeah, so I can see the difference already. Let me just save this one and then do another one here with playing with the sheen. So as it renders, let me just tweak this one. So I'm gonna bring all the way up very high so you can actually see what's going on. It's already washing out a lot of the stuff in there. That's why when I use this guy here, I use very low intensity. I think I told you guys about 0.3, 0.03 like that. Let's see in relation to this one. Yeah, it's just a tiny little thing that's gonna add like around the borders, but let me crank it again. I wanna see it. And can I add a little color in here? Let's see if the color translates. Yeah, you can see with the color, you can actually see how broad it goes. So that's the amount of Fresnel effect you're gonna get around those areas, So all those areas here touched by the magenta, you would see a little bit whitish, kind of like looking like a little bit of a peach fuzz. In their website, like for Arnold manual, they actually say that's a good way to produce like realistic skin is to add this. I kind of disagree, It's like if you add very little of it, I agree with that. So for example, like 0.03, something like that, and then white. I agree that very little. But then if you start adding too much, I mean, like it really gets funky, It works for clothing and stuff, but not necessarily for the skin. Yeah, it's not going to make a huge difference. But so now that we are here, let's plug the displacement map and see how all of them work together. So let's stop this one. Should I save this one? It's still resolving. I don't think it's gonna look that different. So let's just stop it. And then let's plug the displacement here. Let's go to my shader network. And then let's see where the displacement is. Bump task, raise skin. Let's get this one and this one. Let's just input output. And let's see where the displacement is. Should be around, where is it? There's two here. Let's do that. Graph input output. And yeah, right here, displacement. So let's get this one, and I'm gonna drop this one right there. So now we should have a displacement assigned to it. So let's see. It's gonna take a little time here to resolve and to load all those textures. Yeah, that's a good way to actually start your scenes. You know, it's like I normally like adding the skin shader straight away because I know what to expect because I have all those other models I did in the past and I know they work. But when I started trying to figure out the subsurface scattering, this is the first stuff I started doing. And I was like, just eliminate the scattering altogether. And then you start actually playing with those bump and displacement, all those maps first, and see how it looks like in a completely solid mesh instead of like having something with subsurface that adds a lot of variations, right? And things that can go wrong. So if you have, for example, like something set up like this one, which you saw, like for example, my networking here, they share some of the nodes, right? So the bump is shared by both. I could potentially like share the same specular with the both shader networks, and then have everything like a test shader that's just gray, and another one that has the skin. And then I can test just the gray, and then if it's working the gray, I can just switch the shader to this one and it should work fine. Actually, I'm doing the opposite. This is the skin and this one is the test. So here is resolving now with the displacement map. Let's just get just one piece of it here so it doesn't take forever. So we can have something with a little bit of everything. So a little bit of the nose detail we did yesterday with the blackheads, a bit of the cheeks, and some of the lips in there. Let's see if it doesn't take too long. And again, I mean, like this character here, some of you guys got the skin looking much better than mine because this is too tight, you know? It works around here, but the detail in here should be like, I would say like almost like twice as big. So my pores are too close. But again, this guy here, because of his age, right? We spoke about this a lot yesterday about how things just started becoming like more like merging. The forms merge to each other and becomes more like wrinkly than pores, right? The pores start lifting. I might actually smooth out and then start sculpting, putting more wrinkles in there, and then just like adding a few random pores here and there. But this area here, the distance looks a little bit more convincing. So I like the muzzle a little bit better. Starting to resolve around here. Okay. So yeah, all those things we just did for the specular and then the displacement and the micro displacement, all this stuff, micro bump, it really helps, you know. It's like even without the subsurface scattering here, I can see the detail is there. It's all there, you know. And obviously, if you want to use something more physically accurate, then you're gonna rely to something like that website that I point you guys to the microgeometry website, that they have all those samples for different parts of the skin. I remember someone in a forum, I think it was CG Feedback, he was doing actually assigning those different types of micro geometry into different parts of the face to make it more accurate. But at the end of the day, I mean, it's up to you guys if you want to go that route. Some stuff to me sounds a little overkill if I'm getting good results without them, just by using something simple like a noise like that, just to break up. Unless I want to go like really microscopic with the detail, you know, it's like in render stuff really up close. Then I agree, I would have to go that route. But for my renders, although I render stuff like pretty close, it's not like, you know, it's like a microscopic detail, right?
Hey, Chris.
Yeah.
Alphonsus, I guess. He asking, should we get the primary form all the good at first before go to HD geometry, or for the sake of the class we can follow the step that you did and fix it the primary if needed later?
Well, like in my case here, like for the class, I said it before. The way I work, I normally try to get results straight away. So I do like the same rhythm I'm doing right now, and then fixing the primary forms as I go. But before I do this, I have to actually make sure that at least the forms are in the ballpark, you know. They are not like completely off from the final thing. If I feel that the forms are very off, I would not go that HD just yet, you know. But I mean, like the whole thing about this class is that I have this little target, that's my own target, which is to produce one new character every month, right? and then try to explain everything during this process to you guys, how I'm doing every single step. But I'm really not thinking that you guys should pressure yourselves too much, like to follow along everything, because it's very intense. You know, it's like the previous group, you know, it's like they were very overwhelmed with a lot of stuff that was happening, and it happened the same way. You know, it's like, oh, I got stuck with the pores, and I cannot get, you know, it's like out of this loop, and then he's already doing like some lighting with some fancy shader or something. So don't feel like a pressure with that. That's the whole reason we have everything recorded, because if you're serious about all the stuff we're talking about, you're gonna be revisiting those videos many times. You know, it's like, it's almost like, okay, now I'm finally in the process of doing the skin, let's say like the wrinkles stuff. So I'm gonna have to revisit that video, and you're probably gonna have to revisit a couple of times. There's a guy from the previous class, Ren, and he's an amazing sculptor, right? And he was not following along like the class. He was actually just like watching most of the time, and showing some of the model. I think his model he started before the class, so not necessarily you have to do a likeness. You know, it's up to you. If you want to challenge yourself and you know, try your best. But nothing here is actually, you know, it's like there's no homework. There's no like do this or else I'm gonna fire you. You know, it's really like it's me sharing a lot of information with you guys that, in my opinion, it's gonna take time to digest. You know, some stuff is very unusual the way I do, and it takes tests. You know, it's like it's not gonna happen straight away. But I try to be as clear as possible when I'm doing this during the class and explain every single parameter of everything, because at least when you're doing the rewatching, right, you actually, okay, now I know what he's talking about, because now I can see that he just changed that parameter in there, and it's making a difference, you know. But really, guys, don't pressure yourselves. If you feel like it's going to be much better for you, especially if you're a traditional artist, to resolve all your primary forms before you go to the next step, don't feel like you have to be right here at the same step with me. Don't feel that pressure, you know. All I want for you guys is that you actually learn the stuff I'm teaching, even if it's going to take a month or two from this point to get to the, you know, it's like to a realistic result. You know, as long as you guys are watching the videos and doing the exercises and paying attention to all the parameters I'm changing and things like that, you guys are going to be fine, you know. Just don't pressure yourself, otherwise it's going to go crazy, because I got a little bit too fast with the stuff I do, because I do this a lot. And then sometimes people get overwhelmed with the stuff, you know. It's like sometimes like, oh yeah, I'm gonna do follow along, you know. It's like I can build the pores and then go to the next step, and then I was like, wait a minute, I got stuck here, you know.
And now my own question for you.
Yeah.
I applied my pores or the buttholes, you call as you want, and since we don't use the layers in the ZBrush, we have to sculpt in the real intensity, or can we fix it later in Maya or something like that?
Well, if you want to crank the displacement, you can do that in Maya, you know. But for example, it's going to crank the entire thing, right? So it's not just the pores. If you have wrinkles sculpted, yeah. So for example, I can show you here. Let me just save this one first. So store. So that's cool that we did those tests today. So check this out. So the beginning, right? Just the micro displacement or micro bump plus the splattery kind of specular. This one with the extra coat, which is basically like the same spec thing, and now with everything combined, right? Without the subsurface. We can actually plug the subsurface here just to see the difference. But let me show you the displacement stuff. So if you click your model and you press Control A, right? You're gonna go to your properties, like for the attributes, and then if you go to the second tab, that's where your attributes are. Gonna go to Arnold, and then you're gonna scroll down all the way to where you find displacement attributes, and then here you have the height, right? So that's 1. So you see the way it looks like for me. So let's try that at 2. It's gonna be very exaggerated. So those wrinkles should be very, very crunchy. But we can do this as a test. So let's try that with, is it saved? Yeah, it's saved. Let's do it here.
It is just because in my model, I think that the pores was too deep. So I'm afraid that I have to sculpt everything again.
No, I think like the depth you can resolve. I mean, like the thing you cannot resolve is like the distance between them, right? I think like looking at your model, your distance between the pores is much more convincing than mine in the cheeks in here. So if it's just the depth of them, I would just like, you know, it's like if you want to make them a little bit shallower, you can go very carefully, like for example, like a subdivision level, maybe like 2 or 3 subdivision level less, and just smooth it out a little bit. Sometimes it get a little funky, but you know, it's like that can help to actually raise them a little bit. And we can actually try to find, there's so many, like ZBrush has all those types of smooth and smooth like peaks and valleys and stuff. We might be able to find one that actually can preserve the outer stuff and just like raise the pore itself, you know. We can do some tests.
Okay, awesome. Yeah. Awesome. Thanks,
but,
man.
Yeah, but dude, like the distance of your stuff, it looks pretty cool, you know. I think it's gonna work just fine.
Okay. Yeah. My concern was only about the depth of the pore.
Yeah. So check this out. So this is the difference here between like 1 and 2, right? So I'm getting like much deeper stuff now, but everything is getting deeper, right? So.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, thanks, man.
Yeah, no problem. And then let's see, like this stuff, like I'm trying to follow because, you know, it's like at the beginning of this classes when I started like last month, I didn't have a program, and I still don't have a program because I want everything to be very organic. So for example, the whole thing about the fly on the wall, right? So I just hit my button here and I just like, okay, what I'm going to do tonight, right? And but at the same time, I cannot be completely loose because I want to make sure that you guys are getting like some kind of like a structure, right? Like things to follow if you're doing this kind of like as a project, right? So that's why I rewatched the video from the previous class to see what I did at this point of the class. And that's basically what I did. I explored the micro displacement stuff. The only thing that we did different in that one is that we sculpted the micro displacement or the micro bump. So with a plane, I show how to sculpt something that it was basically like similar to the pore, but without the deep hole in the middle. So it's kind of like a much shallower thing with just those little guys. Let's see. It was kind of like, imagine this very shallow without that big hole in there, and then with mostly those guys being the most important things. And that basically I multiplied, I create a plane, and I sculpted it kind of like to create some kind of like seamless texture. And then we apply that in Maya. But even though we are very careful to create something seamless, and we added like did some tricks in Photoshop to make sure that it was seamless, you still, when you apply to the model, because you have to multiply so many times. I think I was multiplying this by maybe like 400 times in Maya. Then you're still gonna see some kind of pattern, you know? So it looked like very patterny, and I didn't like the result. That's why for this one I simplified, and I started using that bump from Arnold. That's basically what I did for Stan. It actually worked very nicely. So I'm kind of bypassing that part, you know? Like, I guess like in every single new class, I'm gonna learn a new thing here and there, and then just try to incorporate and make sure that things get easier for people, you know, not more complicated. That's why my intention is to actually open up the classes for you guys for the future one as well, for the next month. Because if I learn something in the process, I want you guys to have that update, you know, kind of like, okay, he tweaked his shader for his skin shader, and now it looks much better. So I don't have access to that. So I want you guys to have access to that stuff. So let's get this. So now I have comparison between those two, right? Which kind of, it looks nicer actually, the crunchy one. That just shows that I didn't go deep enough in my ZBrush. I was being too timid with it. But since we are here now and we're doing all those tests, and that's going to be what we're going to be doing today. Again, like for next week, on Monday, we're going to be talking about the windows of the soul. So very important, we're going to be talking about the iris and how I sculpted the iris. The shaders, we're going to go through all the shaders. and I'm gonna be showing like the shader network, how I assembled the eyeball itself. A little trick that I discovered that you know, I mentioned to you guys, using like lightning pictures to create veins. It works like it looks like it works great, man. It's like works as a charm. And then we're going to be opening that shader network for the eyes, which is, I think, is one of the most important parts of the whole thing, because that's what really sells the character, right? And then the carancula, how I sculpted, what's the shader of it, how I create the transparency, how everything blends with the skin, right? And then in some of the next classes, we're gonna be actually making everything tight, right? Because at this point, you see everything is kind of loose. Although I have all this detail, I'm still working on my secondary and primary forms as well. So like the eyelids, are gonna be polishing them, making sure that everything is tight against the eyeball, and yeah, so things just gonna the tendency is to progress all over the place. You know, it's not like a linear thing that you're just going to improve one area. Everything is going to improve at the same time as we go. We're going to be tweaking a lot of stuff. So since we are here, let's do this. Let's add some subsurface now, so we can compare everything with the subsurface. So I'm going to crank this one. I'm going to add that little value that they suggest at their page. I think it's like 0.5 and 0.35. Is that correct, or 25? Let me see. Let me just double check here.
35.
Is it 35?
35 and 02 in the end.
Oh, okay. 35 and 02. Okay. Awesome. Thank you. 0.2. So that's the peachy color, right? And then switch to random walk 2. You can add a little bit of front scatter here, just a little bit. Let's see. 0.1. And then the scale is going to be 0.1. 10 or 120, something like that. You can use either and see which one gives you a nice result. And subsurface color, let's not use anything right now, just like a plain color. So let's try something like that, just to have an idea. And kind of desaturated, a little bit on the dark side. And let's try that. Let's see what happens. It's very pale. Let's bring it down. Yeah, like that. The color, the albedo is going to make the entire difference of, you know, it's like in the way that things scatter. I mean, like the scatter color is going to be the same, but the way it affects everything when you add the color, it's pretty impressive, you know. So that's why it's going to be important. I'm going to reinforce a lot of stuff when I'm teaching you guys the color painting for the albedo on Tuesday. So we're going to spend like the whole class just painting the color, and I'm going to emphasize more. I think I didn't do enough with the previous group, the importance of variations of the color. You know, we get too shy, and then we think like, oh yeah, the skin color is pretty plain, right? Like it doesn't have a lot of variation, and it's completely the opposite. You have a ton of, you know, it's like a you know, it's like you have areas like the tip of the nose, for example. You have the cartilage in there, right? So where you have the cartilage, you're probably going to put like a very desaturated, desaturated and light yellow color. So just to make sure that you read as a cartilage. Same if you have like a, you know, it's like you saw the reference I posted yesterday. I was showing the eye bags of that old lady. You could see the structures of the fat deposits underneath. So if you have something like that, you're going to add some yellows in there as well. You're going to explore some greens in certain areas as well. You're going to be painting like the micro veins, and then you're going to have some of those being like reddish, kind of around the cheeks and around the nose in here, and more towards like green when you get like around the eyes and then the temples, right? Let's get that's going to be a fun one to actually deal with. Let's do this one. Let's get this. I keep going back to the latest model because it turned out pretty cool, in my opinion. I think it's one of the most successful ones so far. And yeah, you can see this type of stuff here, you know. So you see the stuff I was talking about, the cartilage. So I added a little bit more of the yellowish around here, like in the tips of the nose, right? And then if I switch to one of the other ones here, like let's see, a front one like this one, you're gonna see, for example, the eye bags, the same stuff that we saw yesterday, you know, some of the yellow stuff. So it's like very just saturated, almost like towards white and towards yellow and white around here. And then some greens around this area here. There is another thing that happens as well, which is the compression, right? So if you have those wrinkles, I mean, like you're making those facial expressions your entire life. And then, for example, like you're getting like a tan, right, from the sun. So for example, like sometimes you get like those marks, it looks a little bit whitish inside of the wrinkles, the bigger wrinkles, and then reddish around it. And then if you have an expression, for example, if you look yourself in the mirror and you just like really make an angry face, you're gonna see like the blood flow coming to those areas and everything gets very reddish in here. But in between, you're gonna see kind of like a yellowish, sometimes it is slightly greenish, you know, where the blood flow is not reaching. So this kind of stuff, you know, it's like every time you start thinking about the character and all the forms that are happening in there, you know, it's like you see the ears, I added some yellows and greens as well in the ears. And then I have some micro veins painted in there just to break it up. So all this stuff is going to be very fun to do, you know. All those little micro bumps and bruises and stuff, there's a lot of color variation underneath it you can see. And the same way I did with Specular that I was showing you guys, like using like different intensities and also different sizes for everything, that's exactly how we're going to do next week, but with color, right? So we add that layer that has all those variations. You see like there's some whitish stuff, and then you're gonna see some more reddish, but then you have those very specific little red spots like that. And those ones are very calculated, right? I place them by hand, like in the spots I want them to be. But everything else in there, you know, it's like also the micro veins, obviously, those ones are placed by hand. But the colors underneath, I mean, like they're very, very random, you know. They're kind of like you know, it's like very splattery. And you see like this kind of stuff is a combination here of thinking about the color, thinking about the pressure that's happening with you know, with the facial expression, but also letting Arnold do its own magic, right? Because if you have a little bit of the yellow in there, when Arnold goes in there, it turns that yellow even deeper, and really looks like it's something that's it's actually, you know, you can read some kind of structure or substance inside of those bags, you know. Yeah, we're gonna be doing all this stuff like next week. And this model here, obviously, I have to try to wrap it up. This was the last week of the last class that I kind of like wrap it up everything. That's why the peach fuzz is so strong. I never had the chance to actually tweak it, but hopefully like in between classes at some point I'm going to be able to. But the thing is, like once I finish one, I jump right to the next class, and that doesn't give me a lot of time, but hopefully I'm going to be able to do something about it. So yeah, look at that. So it's giving you like, it's a very pale skin at this point, obviously, but you know, it's like, so we went from this, right? We did all the steps. So the micro bump spec, micro bump spec is spec 1 and coat, and then everything plus displacement twice as intense, and then twice as intense plus the subsurface gathering. So it's fun to play with this stuff, man. And just so I go back here to what I was showing before, let's get to this view here. Let's see if I can render maybe with a lower res or something so it goes faster. Maybe let's see how fast it's gonna go. So for the lighting here, like I said before, I changed the lighting that was showing the other day. That was basically like an HDRI map, right? But this one here is basically like, I started with a 3-point light, so I removed the backlight now. I can just re-add it. Let's just add that light. This was giving a nice little rim light. Let's get, which one is that? This one? Yeah. So area lights, you can actually change the shapes, right? So you're gonna see something interesting here. So so this one here is the disc. So by default it's a square, so I switched to disc, that one. And those ones are squares. But instead of just using the color for the area light, you can actually go and you can plug an HDRI map to it. So I plugged this map here, which is an umbrella light. So this one, you can go to that website, the SIBL, the one I pointed you guys that you got the Nature Lab stuff. If you scroll down, you're gonna find those maps in there. You're gonna find umbrellas, and they have like you know, some LED lights and things like that. It's pretty cool because let's see if he's gonna open here. It's not, but I can open it here in Photoshop anyway. Let's see that. So that's basically what I have plugged into my area light. And the thing that's pretty cool about that is that you get the same reflection in the eyes, right? So if you render eyes, for example, you're gonna get that reflection in there. So that's why I'm using those. So it's a nice little you know, detail that sometimes is good to add. But I also have my own soft boxes that I modeled. So I have like models that look like octaboxes actually. And then they have a little grid in the front to create some kind of directionality, and also for the reflection, so you get this nice little grid in the reflections. So for the intensity here, I'm basically like, so this one is a little lower from the side, so it simulates a little bit more of like a window kind of light. Although this one is kind of diagonal, right? If I want a window, I would make something a little bit more, probably like that, a little bit more square. And so this one, it has intensity of 8. And obviously not using the normalize, right? And this one here should be half of that. Less than that, so maybe like 2. So that's basically what I'm using. And this one is pretty strong, so 18. So when I switch back here to this guy and do a little render, let's see with the backlight now. I'm not sure if the backlight is working because sometimes I have to refresh the entire scene, like I said before. Let's put a big number here. See, no, it's there. It's just like, it's not showing a lot, but it's there. So let's put maybe like 200. Yeah, look at those ears, super shiny in there. Let's get from here, it's gonna look super strong. Yeah, super strong. Yeah, the thing that I noticed, like when it comes to detail, pore detail and stuff like that, is that if you use HDRI maps for all your lighting, obviously, because it's called global light, everything's gonna wash out. And that's the whole idea, right? Like you go outside and you're not gonna see the detail as crisp, right? But if you have like some very pointy lights, like small sources, then you're gonna get more of the stuff to read. So that's why, for example, in this case here, I'm using not so small. I mean, like my soft boxes are kind of like normal size, like that, right? It's bigger than the face. But if you really want to see the detail for the subsurface scattering, if it's getting right inside of the pores and everything, I would make those little guys, those little soft boxes much smaller. You know, we get like much smaller and just crank the intensity of it, so you can actually see the detail. There's a very old render I did that was actually before I improved the whole shader thing. But I did this one here, and I used just one single light. Let me hide this one from you guys so you don't see what I'm doing. So I'm just sign in here, and then let's switch to my profile. So I posted this one like last year or the year before? This one here. So this is one of my first tests I did for the render I was doing for Dicksmith, and this one has the the displaced iris that I was testing. But this one is just one single light, you know, and it's a very small. You can see like the little reflection there. It's a very small square, and this type of light really helps to reveal the forms, you know. So sometimes if you're trying to evaluate like the depth of your pores and wrinkles and things like that, I would encourage you guys to use something like this, just like a single light that can actually travel, you know. So I can give you like, you see, like I can actually see how deep the subsurface scattering is. I can actually tweak and make it a little bit shallower than that, you know, so I can actually see how deep the wrinkles are. Because if you add like just an HDRI map, sometimes it's very hard. It becomes like very global and washes out everything. Unless you find one of those HDRI maps that are very, you know, it's like it has just one single source of light. Those are pretty good too. Yeah, so that's gonna be helpful, but you know, with the color, obviously, it's gonna look much better than that. Should more like that. Yeah, the nose is actually working, although this part here I have to bring back a little bit. But this area here is pretty bad. It's super shallow and too tiny, the little pores I did. So I'm gonna redo that and go more towards the old man kind of stuff. Let's see, let's go back here. Let's see what we can do to use our time, because we have another 15 minutes. You guys have anything you want to know, like anything you want me to redo, or any tutorial or anything I can do to help right now? Like I was about to do some sculpting, this guy here, but we have 15 minutes. Unless I start doing some sculpting and.
I have a question.
Yeah.
Remember when I used the Mari to create some maps?
Yeah.
For another kind of characters that I did.
Mm-hmm.
I remember that it's possible to use, for example, the cavity mask that comes from the ZBrush to affect the actually our diffuse map with some layers and overlay in Mari to give the variation of the color inside of the pores and the wrinkles. And I think did you make something like that for your diffuse or your albedo painted in
Not at all. Not at all. I mean, like in the past, I remember like when I used the V-Ray, I would do a lot of that stuff. You know, it's like I would export a cavity map and then kind of like switch the color from black to kind of reddish. And then, and like you said, like use some kind of overlay effect in Photoshop and then combine everything, the colors. And then it would give me like that impression that, okay, the pores are, you know, but because Arnold scatters so well, you know, it's like it can go inside of the pores, especially if you're using the SSS in Autobump. It gives me that like a rich redness without using any map, you know. So that's why I don't use it. But I wouldn't say like, okay, I'm against it. It's just that I feel like it's more natural when you don't have that stuff baked in there, you know. Because when I look at the skin from up close, the redness that's inside of the pores is coming from the scatter itself, and then that's why I feel like well. But at the same time, it might be very useful if you want to try to do that type of effect I was mentioning. You know, it's like, for example, like if you have like a sunburn, right? And you have like the wrinkles in there. Maybe the wrinkles can go a little bit wider, and then the reddish stuff's gonna be on top of it. But
yeah, I got you.
Yeah, but I love the way that Arnold scatters stuff. You know, it's like so cool. Oh, remember like I was sculpting that wrinkle just now. And I was actually sculpting with a very broad and very low intensity stuff for the major wrinkles. That's exactly how I was treating the surface in here. So if I show you this, so for example, like if I go to intensity of like 4 or 3, let's say 4. And for example, like you see those little forms that I have, like not the little, but the bigger forms in here. That's how I was actually approaching. Let me get a reference here so I don't go too crazy without any reference. Let's see, this guy here. So I have this guy here. It's very low resolution, actually. Let's try to find one with the better. This one is a better resolution, actually. So if I have like some bigger forms, for example, like his nose, you know, it's like there's indentations in there and all this stuff, I can actually go to a resolution that's not the highest. So right now, for example, I'm before HD, right? I'm at 154,000 polys only. And then those types of wrinkles that I added right here, I added the same way, you know, it's like with a very low intensity like that. So you see, like I can carve it like that. I can go even lower than that. So like at 3, for example. And then I'm gonna just like build some of them here before I go HD. So like around here. I'm just gonna try to get some of them. And I can make the brush pretty big from time to time, just to really dig in those forms and build up like almost like secondary forms, right? Just with without going full on HD. Because once you're in HD, it's hard to control because you can go lower and you're still gonna get a lot of detail going on in there. But if you're at this level here, then you can actually really break things up, especially like around the nose. You see, like I added all these forms in here. That adds more complexity, you know. Just looking at the reference in there, seems like he has some of those striations, you know, they're very kind of very organic and random in a way. So I'm just adding some of those in here. Because in this case here, right, like yesterday I was doing everything at the same time, like I do a lot of times, just like build up the tertiary together with the secondary, right? Same way I do the primary and secondary at the same time. But in this case here, I can actually, you know, go with a little bit more of an order and actually add like the bigger forms first before I go with HD. This is the same problem I had the other side, which is basically this wrinkle here is too low, too high. Actually, you have to go lower and build it right there.
Hey Chris, can
yes.
I request something somehow related to
sure.
the topics we're talking about?
Yep.
I'm working on a character and wanted to know, do you have any website for cloth textures? I mean, the maps, displacement map, kind of bump maps?
That's an interesting question. Not that I'm aware of, but I'm pretty sure there, man, I remember going through, where was that? I think it was like ad that I got on my Facebook or something from this website that they had like multiple patterns for clothing. And I would say like maybe like stuff related to architecture, maybe they have like patterns for clothing and displacement, but I'm gonna have to think about it. If you guys like,
that's fine if you give us the link after the class whenever you find it.
Yeah, I can try to find it for sure.
Thanks, man.
Yeah, anything you guys want to share as well? I mean, like, I don't know if I shared with this class. Did I share the one that Palomita posted, like that jackpot of like full of references and stuff? Did I post that one already?
No, you just talked about Palomita and sharing some butthole.
Oh, okay. Yeah, that's true. But check this out. So let's go to the other group. And let's see if we can find here. She posted this amazing link. I was almost completely convinced I shared with you guys, but I'm probably wrong. That was this gigantic, oh, look, those are some of the works from the previous students. This is the stuff that Ran is doing right now. So this is like a Don Quixote that he's sculpting. And let's see, this is my colleague Sven. He works with me at ILM, and this is basically the one that he did during the class. So he's still working on it. Yeah. So that's why I kind of like, I didn't want to mix the two groups just yet, because it can be a little intimidating because people are kind of like further along, you know. But let's see. There's all kinds of levels too, you know. We're gonna find like some people have more experience, some are more new at this stuff, you know. But she posted this stuff was a long time ago. Let's see. See if this one is okay. Try to find, because it's a very good resource, man. See, like we don't have a lot of like done stuff, you know. It's like people are still revisiting all the videos. This is like a sculpture from Ran after watching my video. So he did this one for his iris. So he's like being very careful. He watched those videos so many times, and every time he watches, he catches something else, and then he follows it, you know. Very dedicated. Some of the skin details in there.
Revisiting the videos is when you say in the recorded video, you can ask something. We suddenly want to ask a new question on the record.
So let's see like more examples. Like that's how he sculpted his. Yeah, Rand is going to town with this stuff. He's really, yeah, like some of the patterns in there for the skin. There's a lot of cool work. This is the butthole I was talking about. So this is the donkey butthole that she posted. It was pretty funny. And then let's see if I can find her sword. Oh, this is the Don Quixote that he has planned after the mustache and everything. It's gonna look pretty cool, but he's still working on his renders. Let's see. Man, it was this amazing resource. Oh, where is it? Let's see. Oh, this one. Oh, is it? No, no, that's not it. If I don't find it now, I can find it later for you guys. It's a pretty cool model too. Yeah, some of you guys are a bunch of talented guys, dude. I mean, like every single class seems like I get all those very high profile guys. And yeah, I mean, like the levels are all over the place, like I said. So some people are gonna have a little bit more trouble than others. But as you revisit those videos, you know, I think you're gonna really find a lot of cool stuff. Oh man, I'm not finding it. Yeah, I'm gonna look for it a little later, and probably like after the end of the class, and then just post for you guys because it was so good. She has a massive Google gallery with all types of. Oh, this one I found it. So did you guys get this one?
I believe.
If I didn't share, I'm gonna share it right now. Actually, this basically like she collects all those references, right? It has like close up, like for teeth, pores, wrinkles, facial expressions. Someone was talking about like dark skin, you know. Look at this awesome reference, like for different types of skin, like hand skin and you know different parts of the body. This is an amazing source of information. You know, it's like all those eyes. Amazing stuff for color. So I'm gonna share this link right now at our group. Actually, I'm gonna share right there at the new group that actually combines everybody because I think that's gonna be better. So we have that. Let's see. Where's the group again? Forgot.
By the way, anytime during any session of this class, if you talk about bits about the Hellboy you've done, that would be amazing because I've done an Hellboy and that's a messy detailing on his skin. But I want to know how you done the skin color and the shading.
Oh, I don't think it looks that great just yet, but I can definitely open the file and show you everything that I did in there. You know, let's just post this one here. Thanks. And oh, another thing that this question came up in the previous class that was about like dark skin, right? Like for example, like a black person skin, and then we did some research actually, and I can post the paper that we found. I'm gonna post everything in this links in this new page. But it turns out there's a bunch of different variations. You know, the melanin is kind of dependent of the type of skin that it is. So, for example, like you're gonna have a certain amount of scatter if it's like a natural black person skin, but then if it's someone who is tan and it can be just as dark, the scattering is gonna work differently. So it's kind of like it's weird because like if you have your skin burned, obviously like the scatter is gonna you know it's like travel differently inside of the skin. But it's so weird to think about that. You know, it's like because you're gonna see like okay, it's just dark skin. And you should have like a formula that is going to behave that way every time. And it's completely like it's not the case. You know, it's like if it's like suntan, it's a different type of scatter. If it's like natural skin, it's a different type of scatter. It's like all kinds of variations. But there's some paper actually I collected, scientific paper. You guys can take a look if you can understand it. But it's very interesting. So that's Palomita. I'm gonna post this one. So this one now is available to you, and thank God for Palomita because this is an amazing source, and you can just like have it. You know, like this is gonna be great for you when you're doing your pores and you know it's like older people and stuff like that. Look at that, man! It's amazing stuff. So yeah, have edit and then lots of like black skin and you know lots of awesome reference in there for you guys. Look at this stuff, man. It's amazing. And look at all the stretching and the direction, right? All those guys. It's pretty damn cool. You can have like use this as a reference to build different types of pores, right? To just like get like different types of skin. Look at this one here, kind of dryish, right? With the little you know, dry skin around each one of the details. So many things going on, like this one here too. It's amazing. So yeah, awesome sauce, guys. Gonna stop for now, and then when we come back on Monday, we're gonna be sculpting some iris, and then talking about the windows of the soul. We're gonna be talking about eyes, which is the, you know, to me is one of the most important parts of the character. If the eyes are not realistic, it doesn't sell it, you know. So and I hope you guys have a great weekend. Obviously, talking very quickly about Saturday, I already sent the email out and I posted in our group as well. I'm going to be running in the morning, so at 9 in the morning, and then at the same time as our class always runs, it's going to be at 9. Actually, half an hour before the class starts normally, so it's going to be like at 9 instead of 9:30 for me, and then 9 in the morning. And please just don't drop anything like at last minute, because last time that happened in the previous class, what happened is that last minute someone was uploading something, and then he basically locked the entire thing because I was already downloading. And when you download from the Google Drive, he actually zips everything into a single file for me to download. And then because he was uploading at the same time that was happening, it basically like Google starts scrambling, you know, it's like spinning wheels. And then it took like an hour and a half to download something that should take like maybe 15 minutes. And then basically like I had to cancel that review and then ask them to come back like an hour later. And then we kind of resumed the whole thing. But that was just because the last minute thing, it really screws things up. So don't do that. Try to, let's say like right now it's like 11:35 p.m. of, for me it's like Thursday, right? So let's say 24 hours from now or like 30 hours from now, that's basically the deadline. And then after that's going to be, you know, it's like hard for me to manage. But another thing, like if you guys have work posted in the group already, and I already gave feedback to it, you know, it's like you already have a direction on where to go. Try to avoid like reposting in the reviews if it's exactly the same thing, you know. If you did some more work in it, you want to get some reviews, I'm totally fine with it. But if it's the same thing, you know, it's like just for the sake of, you know, the group is pretty big and I want to make sure that I reach everybody. So if it's something that, you know, you already have an idea where to go with, try to, you know, it's like just bypass that review session. And then obviously if you keep posting it on the group, we're going to do our best to actually reply over there as well. So thank you so much, guys. And I see you on Saturday.
Thanks a
Thank
lot,
you, Chris.
Have a great weekend.
Thank you. Have a great one, guys.
Bye-bye.
Bye.